So you can see there's a new packet. You can pass them around. What I thought I'd do, we'll just do this for several weeks leading up to Rosh Hashanah. It's almost Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul is next week, so we're going to start the tractate Rosh Hashanah, which in some sense seems appropriate because it's coming to Rosh Hashanah. On the other hand, as you can imagine, the Talmud changes subjects so often that the actual study we're going to do about Rosh Hashanah, at least the first several weeks, is not going to be all that relevant. But anyway, it's a place to start. Remember, tractates always start technical, with technicalities, and the hardest material is always in the beginning, so you kind of have to eat your vegetables before you get to more fun material. But you can't skip this first part because there's no context for it. So and this is the Steinsaltz translation, which I'm sorry, this is the Sonsino translation. It's an old translation. It's about 100 years old. And I've been avoiding this. I don't think we've ever used it in this class. So it's 100 years ago, and it was done in Great Britain, and what was called Great Britain in those days. And so it's a very highfalutin English, sometimes Shakespearean, and so not so easy to understand. However, it's a very, very good translation too. I mean, it's a very well done scholarly approach to the language, and they get everything right. So the difficulty for us is that it almost sometimes seems like a different language. Like, is this English or what? And for me, sometimes the Hebrew is easier than the English because the English gets so twisted. But I think it's a way you can follow it. I mean, I'll read, I'll explain. You'll see it in English, with explanations and questions. I think you'll be able to follow the English, and we'll see how it goes for a little while. It's not laid out so well, but none of the translations are laid out very well, to be honest. There was one time, the Steinsaltz, when I thought it was laid out pretty well, and that's out of print now, and you can't even get them. But so you'll see it's just across the page, and if you're going to follow in English, so you have to flip it if you go to the past introduction, and then you'll see Hebrew if you open it two-sided. I mean, you'll see Hebrew on your right, and then the English is on the left. And then what happens is, and this is what happens in a lot of translations, the English part is much longer because there's lots of explanations. So you'll flip the page, and the Hebrew across will still be the same Hebrew. So if you're following in the Hebrew, you can use the Hebrew and then flip when the time comes. If you're following in the English, then same thing. You'll flip when the time comes, and then across from it will be the Hebrew, but in a different place. So you have to sort of choose. Either you're going to follow the Hebrew or the English. It's hard to go back and forth. It's very hard to go back and forth. Okay. So it starts with kind of an interesting discussion about sort of the kind of arbitrary decision we make to mark time. We're deciding, like, this is a year. We're going to call this year, and we're going to call this year 1, year 2. Where do we come up with these things? Where do we come up with the idea of a year? Why is a year a certain amount of time and not another amount of time? What's the point of tracking time at all? And it starts with very realistic, practical, halachic issues, and then it goes into more philosophical, just kind of musing about the passing of time, and when time starts, and what we'll even get to some interesting issues of what really is time. But you'll see it starts very technically, very practically. So do you see where it is? Mishnah. Right. Okay, so it always starts with the Mishnah. Arba Rosh Hashanahim. So there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. So you thought there's only one. There's 4. This is a famous Mishnah. A lot of you have heard this already. So, and it starts with a clear difficulty in the Torah about time. And really, it's a very simple question. What's the first month of the year? Because in the Torah, there's at least 2 that are classified as the first month of the year. Yeah, so Nisan is it's almost always in the Torah called the first month of the year. And yet Rosh Hashanah, the new year, in the Torah itself starts in Tishrei, the month of Tishrei. So there are 2 months that are the beginning of the year. So there's a confusion already in the Torah as to what's the first month. And like I said before, it's somewhat arbitrary too. Like when does the first of the year start? In Western countries, it's January. Which is so. Let's talk about it just for a bit. So, what's the weather like in Nisan? What would be a hint to you that we could start the year in Nisan? Yeah, it's the beginning of the rainy season. So that makes sense. Okay, so we'll start the year here. It's the beginning of the rainy season. Things are starting to grow. You see that's why you have parsley on Pesach, right? It's just kind of green stuff coming out of the ground. That's a good time to start. Okay, what historical event in Jewish history happens in Nisan? Yeah, Exodus. It's also good historical reason. Okay, we start. So it's announcing the beginnings. So it's saying the beginning starts when the earth is coming to life after the winter. Also, when we left Egypt, that's when we begin as a people. So it's statements beyond just an arbitrary. It's the new year. It's a statement. This is when life begins. This is when the year began. This is when the Jewish people begin. Okay. So what if it's Tishrei? So what's happening outside? First of all. Yeah, it's exactly the opposite, right? Things are sort of shutting down.
80 degrees.
Right. Yeah. So why would that be the beginning of the year?
Agriculture.
It's the end of the year.
Yeah, because the beginning is the end. So things are shutting down. So that's when you start. When things are shutting down because we're done. So we're gonna. But it's similar in weather to the December. What's January 1st in terms of just seasons? It's total nothing outside. So this is when we're going to start during the blackest time. So September's a little different because it's the process of shutting down. That's when but they're both transition times. What happens historically in Tishrei? Anybody know?
How far back?
As far back as you want to go.
I thought the creation.
Yeah, so this is the legend, is that the world was created. So that's a different statement. So it's the historical event is not the Exodus from Egypt. The historical event is the Big Bang, right? And that's when we'll start time. I mean, that's actually, technically that's when time starts. Even physicists say that too, right? The time starts with the Big Bang. Time starts with the creation of the world. So that's when month one will be, and year one started, at the creation. Okay, so let's talk just 1 second about. I don't want to get into all this too, but do you have any theories about January 1st and what that's about? I mean, why? We already talked about the seasons. It's nothing.
January 1st is 8 days after the 25th.
Yeah. Yes.
Go back to Roman time. It's something like that, but it's supposed to be the bris of Jesus.
Right. Yeah. So there's different theories about the circumcision of Jesus. It's the 8th day after the 25th he was born. Of course, he wasn't really born the 25th, so it wasn't really a circumcision. So, but by the way, the world probably wasn't created on Rosh Hashanah either. So I mean, cultures have legends. That's fine. They're allowed to have.
Right after the winter solstice.
Yeah, so it's after the winter solstice. It's around the winter solstice. It's a little unclear. Yes, there's some Roman. It was probably started during Roman times. Somebody could do research on that if you want. I'm sure it's in Wikipedia. But it's sort of lost in the mist of memory. The clearest thing we have in the Torah, at least, is a very clear connection between Nisan, which is actually called the first month. It's called the first month of the Torah.
Right.
And it's also identified as the month of leaving Egypt. Right. So and also it's very, very clear the world is coming to life. So the puzzle is, why did Tishrei become Rosh Hashanah when Nisan seemed to be the more logical time?
Yeah.
And one possible solution is, in fact, there are two Rosh Hashanahs. There's one, and why that would be is, I don't know. Anyway, so that's what this first Mishnah is going to go. There's actually four. And for four different reasons. Okay.
Well, the Roman year started in March, and Primavera is.
Is that right? I didn't even know that.
And January, February were like added months. They didn't exist.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so the whole idea of months is sort of arbitrary too. It follows seasons a little bit, but how many months you're going to have, how long they're going to be. The most arbitrary is the week, which doesn't correspond to any natural pattern. Everything else does, like a 24-hour day and a month. Follow a season, but the week doesn't follow. So the week is totally arbitrary. But when you start counting, is I wouldn't say arbitrary. It's a decision. That's a decision. I mean, even like the year whatever 2014. I always forget. Ever since 2000, it's been hard for me to tell you what year we're in. I just lose track. I never really accepted that we. Yeah, I guess. Emotionally, I never really accepted that we got past 2000, so I just don't even. I don't know. We're in the 2000s somewhere. I don't know what year. So yeah, 2014, and that's a conscious decision in the Christian world that it reflects back to what they say happened then, although it didn't happen then. We know. Yeah.
A semi-joke about 7. Many researchers have shown that human memory range is 5 plus minus 2.
Uh-huh.
And that's why.
And you can't remember what. But, oh, yeah. Plus, minus,
That's why we have 7 days,
Yeah.
7 numbers
Yeah.
in telephone numbers.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's
At least
interesting.
here.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And it's been proven again and again and
Yeah,
again. So
yeah.
is
7
that
days.
related?
That's all we could remember. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you would need a nursery rhyme figure to remember, like you do with the months.
Didn't 7 days start? The 7 days start with Judaism with the creation.
I've heard that that's the case. That we invented the week.
That's right.
Yeah, the whole concept of the week.
Because
All right.
Shabbos becomes a
Yeah.
holy day,
Right.
7th day.
Right.
Isn't it based on the moon, just dividing it up into 4 sections?
Well, you divide it up. You could divide it up into 3 and say it's 10 days. Yeah, I mean it's just a. Yeah. Or you could have 4-day weeks and it's 7 divided by 7. So it's okay.
Based on the moon cycles. I mean,
No, the month is based on the moon cycles. That's everything else is based on something. The year is based on the sun.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. I've been avoiding this, as you can see, but we got to get to it at some point. This isn't so hard. Arba'a Roshei Shanim Heim. There are 4 New Years. Be'echad b'Nisan. Rosh Hashanah Limlachin, the first of Nisan. Pesach, by the way, is also weird. Pesach is not the first of Nisan. Pesach is the 15th of Nisan.
Right.
So already it's like, why is in the middle of the month if that's the beginning? But we'll ignore that for now. The rabbis will ask that. But start the month on the full moon. I mean, if you're starting it, you're starting it. But in any case, the time starts actually before the Exodus.
That's right.
15 days before the Exodus, that's when time starts.
Right.
So anyhow, that's called the New Year of the Kings. I'm translating that literally. Rosh Hashanah Limlachim, which means kind of the government.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's the New Year of the government. Okay, and without looking ahead, I mean, you can probably figure out what that means for the purposes of once you bring in the government. What's the government's main job? Taxes. Exactly. Why are they there? To take your money. That's why we have a government. So with regard to taxation, Nisan is the time that you start. So it's sort of an April 15th kind of. And now once we have that, we understand that we also have several New Years. I mean, why do organizations have fiscal years, which are different than our fiscal year is July 1st. April 15th is a year. According to the IRS,
You need the time to
government has a fiscal year. There's an academic year. The academic year starts in September. So right. So this isn't so strange, really. I mean, let's say it's still strange, but it's human.
Right.
Humans start things at different times depending on what they do and the nature of the institution. So you have one institution is the government. Okay, mlachim in general, which is taxation, but uliraglin, okay, and also for festivals, and this is from the Torah. Pesach is the first festival, although Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. Pesach is the first festival. Now, of course, since the year is circular, it's arbitrary. You got to pick. Purim could be the first, but they're saying no. We start our festive calendar, our sacred calendar starts with Pesach. It doesn't start with Rosh Hashanah. Despite the fact that it's called Rosh Hashanah. Why you call it Rosh Hashanah? Yes.
Could Yom Kippur be the driving force for the New Year? It's just preparing for Yom Kippur.
Oh, preparing for Yom Kippur. I don't know. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
That period of time, but
yeah. Yeah. I'll think about that. Be'echad be'elul, the first of Elul, which we're coming up to, Rosh Chodesh Elul, that's also Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
Rosh Hashanah l'maaser behemah. So that's a Rosh Hashanah for the tithing of animals. So that's a kind of taxation. You have to give 1/10 of your animals to the temple, and somehow you calculate it based on you do it every first of Elul. That's when you do it. That's when it's due. That's the April 15th, just for animals, just for the tithing of animals. Okay.
Where was that set?
Said right here. Yeah, no, it's not. Tithing of animals is in the Torah itself.
right.
So when to do it, it comes in the Mishnah. It's got to be a time to do it, so that's the time to do it.
It's a level of maturity also.
Yeah, well, you can't do it in Pesach because it's a holiday. There's some logical reasons why, which we'll get to. Okay. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, Be'echad B'Tishrei. So they say Be'echad B'Tishrei. So they actually say on Rosh Hashanah, that's the time that you tithe. That's your. Now, of course, that would be difficult to do on a holiday, but that's what they say anyway. Be'echad B'Tishrei. So this is the first of Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah l'shanim. So for the year, what that means is designating the year. So that's what we still have that. A year changes. It goes from being the year 5,700 and whatever. I lost count in Judaism a long time ago. So 5,737, and then in the first of Tishrei, it's the next one. It's 5,738. Okay. So for L'Shanim, but more. L'Shmitim, so for sabbatical years. So, and you need that, because when it says every seventh year,
Gotta know when.
gotta know when too. It's not when you make a land sale. Everybody has to celebrate the sabbatical year together, and it starts on Rosh Hashanah. Uleyovlot, of course, also for the Jubilee, because the Jubilee is every 50th year, but that's connected to the sabbatical year. L'Neti'ah just means for planting, for laws having to do with planting. We'll get to that. L'Yerakot, also for vegetables. So vegetables, there's all sorts of, as opposed to animals, there's all sorts of biblical laws about vegetables. Okay. Be'echat b'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah le'ilan. The first of Shvat, well, it's the first of Shvat. The first of Shvat is the new year for trees.
Right.
So but just for a second, and there's a dispute over this, but what does that mean for trees? What do you think it means?
Planting.
Yeah, well, probably, yes, for planting. All of this, since the Mishnah is a book of law, any kind of halacha for trees then would be instituted on that day. So it's going to have a halachic. It may be a day for planting. That's what we've turned it into. But I'm going to continue. Kidivrei Beit Shammai. That's what Beit Shammai says. So you know right away it's not going to be the law, because the law hardly ever. There's only 3 instances where the law follows Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel Omrim B'chamisha Asarbo. So Beit Hillel says it's on the 15th of Shvat, which in Hebrew is written Tedvav.
Yeah.
Tedvav is just the numeric of it's the letter equivalent of 15, and you come up then with Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat Higi, and that's the Chag HaIlanot, the holiday of trees in the Rosh. And in a lot of kids' books it says the birthday of trees, which is interesting, like they have a birthday. But here's it's Rosh Hashanah Ilanot. It's the beginning of the year for trees. Okay, so we'll get into details of what that means. It's for halachic purposes, for legal purposes. That's when you start counting. Okay, it's become, of course, there's only two holidays here which still have force. Well, I shouldn't say that. Well, really, there's 2 that still have force. There's a Tu B'Shvat, which we still celebrate. Right. There's a Rosh Hashanah, which is for the year, which we still celebrate. The first of Nisan we sort of mark because Pesach is coming, but we don't call it Rosh Hashanah anymore. And the first of Elul we don't call Rosh Hashanah anymore at all. So 2 of these have survived in Jewish consciousness. But you start with 4 different New Years.
One of them's the Torah.
Sorry? Well, the Torah, it's very clear that Nisan is the first month.
Right. You start the Torah reading all over again.
Oh, no, well, that's a different one. That's Simchat Torah. I know, it's another one. Yeah, New Year for the Torah. I know.
That's New Year.
I know. Make it even more confusing. Yeah, and in many ways that makes no sense at all. I mean, you should start on Rosh Hashanah, or the day after Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, but you wait another whatever, month. Yeah. I know. Yeah. All right. All right. Well. All right. Now we're going to get to some technical details. So you're going to love this stuff, I think. I think you'll enjoy it. Lamlachim. Okay. So first of all, Lamlachim. Okay. Now for kings, which is for government, or I'll tell you something else too. Like in the Bible, dates are figured according to the king. Whenever they wanted to tell you a date and a year, they had months. Although the months were often different in the Bible, like there was the month of Ziv, there were different months, but the year was always the year of the king. Right. It was the 23rd rule of Yehoiakim. So if they want to give us a specific date, they didn't start counting like 5,742 or 2014. They would always refer to the king. So the Talmud here is referring to that era when you would count year, at least according to the king. And my guess is in Babylonia, where they were writing this, they probably still did that. I don't know that for sure. That's not such an uncommon way. I mean, in Shakespeare, it wasn't that long ago that's how, if you had a king, that's how you would count years. Certainly that's how they counted in the Bible. Okay. So if it was, and there would be some ambiguity. So if it's the 23rd year of Yehoiakim's king, and that's a date, well, when did he start as king?
That's what we got to worry about.
Yeah. So what they're basically saying is that it doesn't matter. That year starts in Nisan. Okay. All right. Well, so go on. So Lamai Hilchata. First of all, what's the halachic? Because that's all we care about. What's the legal ramification? Amar Rav Chisda said lishtarot. He said it has to do with documents, dating of documents. You put a date on a document, okay? And now we're going to get some laws about it. Ditnan, as it's written. Here's a law. Shtarei chov hamukdamin. But any lawyers here? Because this is Phil's not here. Yeah. So anyhow, a document that's early, psulin, doesn't count. So this is the English actually has it more. A document that is antedated. Antedated sort of means predated, right? So antedated. So you have a document that says this document will take place in the future. At that point, it's not a valid document, which makes some sense.
At
right?
what point? At the point
when it's written? No. So the thing is that it's never a valid document.
It's never a valid document.
It's never a valid. You can't. Is it antedate? That's the word, right? You can't in Jewish law. You can't antedate a document ever. This loan will take place, March 15th. If it's March 14th, when you sign the document, then it's not a valid document, because there is a halakhic principle here. You're agreeing to something that hasn't come to being yet. You can never agree to something that hasn't come into being yet. So you can't. So that document then is never. So now why is that relevant to our discussion? You'll see in a second, because you have to know. Well, what? Let's say there's only a year in that document, right? It may not be like a specific date. There may only be a year, and if that year hasn't come into being yet, then that document is never valid. Okay.
So there's also a concept.
Yeah.
So if you provide, there was this whole thing about option back. If you backdate something.
Yeah.
So if it sounds just like the same thing, because if you're agreeing to something today, but it's dated before today, then it doesn't seem to be legitimate.
Oh, so that's the next thing.
Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Well, this is the next one. Ha-me'ucharin, which is post-dated, ksharim. That's kosher. So a document that's post-dated, you can bring that to the court, and that's always valid. Yeah. So retroactive. I guess in lay person's terms, right? It's retroactive. If the agreement is retroactive to 3 weeks ago, and I bring it to the court today, then that's okay. You can have retroactive agreements. You can't have agreements that look to the future like this agreement.
So that's the stock market.
Yeah. Well, when you sell something, you put the date. You do it that day. When you're writing the document, you put today's date. It's valid today's date. You don't do it in the future. No, a post-dated check.
Post-dated check.
A posted check is worth something. It's an antedated check that's not worth anything. Yeah, I can't write you a check and have the date be at 3 weeks from today. It would not be valid.
Posted.
Yeah. Oh, that's posted.
No, that's what you said is valid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but if you keep
it's in the past. No. If I write you a check and I write the date 3 weeks ago, then that's valid. If I write it 3 weeks from today, it's not valid.
Until that date.
Until the date.
Until the date, right? Yeah. Although no, I think it's not valid. I think it's not valid at all. If I wrote it, I think in Jewish law.
You go to a bank on a post.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about Jewish law. I don't know what banks are going to do. Yeah, if you're going to listen to me about what banks are going to do, then.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You go to a bank with a postage check.
Yeah.
That's cash it.
Written for December 25. They'll pay you.
Yeah. So in Jewish law, they wouldn't do that.
Chances are they wouldn't even look at the date.
That's right. Unless it's over a year.
Right now.
See, so the best way is to pay your bills all the time.
Right.
Do it. It'd be done.
Okay, we're going to go on. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Melech Shamad Be'esrim B'Tisha B'Adar. So a king becomes king on the 29th of Adar, which is the last day of Adar. You become king on the last day of Adar. Kevan she'egia b'Nisan alta lo shana. When it comes to Nisan, he's already been king. So he's been king for 1 day. In fact, they say for the purposes of this of dating, he's been king for a year. So Nisan then is year 2 of his reign, even though he became king the day before. Yeah. So is that clear? So once it's Nisan, it's the second. So when you're dating, it's you just dated the second year.
Right.
Yeah. Even though he's only been king for a day. Yeah.
So what will happen, Rabbi? Will there have 2 Adars? Which one? The first and the second?
Yeah, they don't get to that. Yeah, but it would be the second, obviously. No, it would be the second. Yeah.
It would be the second.
Yeah.
Okay. Ve'im lo amad ela b'achad b'Nisan, ein monin lo shana, ad she'yagia Nisan achir. Okay, and if he happens to become king on the 1st of Nisan, his second year doesn't start until a year from now. Okay, so, I mean, well, you'll say, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, that's obvious, right?
That is obvious.
But you'll see, so the Talmud asks the same thing, right? Amar Mar, Melech Shamad Be'esrim B'Tisha Ba'adar, Kevan She'egia Chad B'Nisan Atalo Sha'ah. So the master now repeats exactly. It says a king that was made king on the 20th of Adar. On the 1st of Adar, that starts his second year of reign. So he's been a year already. HaKamash Malan, that teaches us. De Nisan Rosh Hashanah Mlachim. So it teaches us that Nisan is, that's how we get the idea, that Nisan is the first of the month for kings. The Yom Echad, at that point, one day, Bashana in the year, Chashu Shana. So one day during that point is considered a year. Ve'im lo amad ela b'echad b'Nisan. He didn't become king. He became king the 1st of Nisan. Ein monin lo shana ad she'yagia Nisan echad. And then he doesn't become king for a whole year. His second year doesn't begin till the following Nisan. Pshita. That's obvious. Why did you even bother to say that? Why are you wasting my time studying Talmud with obvious things that I can figure out on my own? That's a common, complaint, a common objection in the Talmud. So now what the writers of the Talmud have to do is show you, no, it's not as obvious. It's much more complicated than you think. With my Jewish brain, I could come up with an assumption that you might make that would be reasonable but wrong. That's the challenge right now. So I'll just finish that really quickly. Lo tzricha. You actually needed to say it. It wasn't as obvious as you think. De imnu ale me Adar. It could be that the king was actually appointed in Adar. It was decided that he would be king in Adar, but he actually didn't become king till the 1st of Nisan. So, the board of elders gets together and decides, Plony should be king. Now, the date is Adar 28, but we'll say, we'll give him a couple days to read up on it, and we'll make him king Adar 1. I'm sorry, Nisan 1. Okay, so just because he was chosen on the 28th, you might think, well, okay, that year is the year of his kingship, and 3 days later it's the second year. In fact, no. It's when so what you learn from this is it's when he begins reigning, and not when he is appointed. And it's very similar in American law too. You have an election, but he's not president until he or she is not president until. So his actual reign as president doesn't start until it starts, and you don't start counting his time as in office until Okay.
Inauguration.
Inauguration. We'll continue next week.
Very good.